You're listening to the Cash News Podcast with Tom Meehan and Shaun Ferrari.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cash News Podcast. We have a special guest today. We'll get to that in a second, but I just want to say hello. We're taping. I think this is going to be probably the last taping of this year. So December 17th. Why I'm saying that is I think just because we like to say happy holidays and happy new year ahead of time, but you probably won't hear this till mid-January, but it'll definitely be relevant then. I am joined as always by my esteemed co-host and friend, Shaun Ferrari. And then we have a very, very special guest, Jason, who's on, and I'm going to let Jason talk about who he is and where he's from in just a minute. But Shaun, I'll turn it over to you I know we had some stuff. We saw each other a couple of weeks ago. So just what's going on in your world?
Getting ready for the holiday. I think we chatted last week and kind of summarized what was going on with the executive summit we talked about, the trends there. I think this will be a great follow-on discussion from that, and delve a little deeper into those topics with Jason. So I think the timing works really well. As Tom said, this is our last one of the year. It's a little bit before the holidays. So I hope everybody had a good holiday. We're hopefully going to have one as well in a couple days. But I hope everybody enjoyed the holidays and is getting back into the swing of things now. I will say I don't know, Tom, they might see a surprise, maybe like some sort of live stream from us. We're talking about possibly getting together. Tom's visiting the area with all the kids, so we might put all of our kids together and film some sort of live shot just to show everyone the insanity that can happen. So I don't know if it'll happen, but maybe. Anyway, enough of that. I think we'll get talking about business. So Tom, I don't know if you want to introduce Jason, or Jason, you can take it from here. And you're muted, Tom. There you go.
My little message told me I was muted and everything. I've been pretty good about that recently too. But so the whole live stream with the kids thing is going to be interesting. So we're not sure yet because we're debating. We're not even sure how many kids will be present. It's a whole thing. But I'm going to head into DC with the family, and there's just no way I can be that close to Shaun without seeing him. And generally, when we're together, we find the need to tape a podcast that is. And I'm going to guess it'll have nothing to do with cash or payments if we do it.
We could talk about like allowances and the use of cash in the 6 to 13-year-olds. I don't know.
Yeah. To give context, we'll have 15, 16, 19, 110, right? 11 is it?
Or 11 and 13.
Yeah, 11, 13. So we're gonna basically see if we, what we can do with it. So there is a chance that we will just be reporting back to you. I'm gonna be honest with you. There's just a chance that we might not actually make it work. So we might just be reporting back to you. But I'm sure that we'll have a fun story to say. But we are experts on live production now, as you guys know.
Yeah, okay.
We did it once, so we're pretty confident that we can do it again. But we've never done it without Samantha, so I'm not sure that it would be live. It would probably be a taping, and then it's probably better that way because we could decide whether or not we'll actually want to put it on, because real life is with that many kids, I'm not sure how to be. But enough about that. I mean, I'm going to let Jason, because he'll do a much better job of telling everybody who he is and what he does. I've full disclosure, Jason and I've been pseudo working together for a long time, from a standpoint of we have mutual customers and do stuff. So I'm really excited. I'm a little disappointed it took so long, but I know now that Jason's on, we're going to have Jason as a regular. I'm positive he'll come back and visit us. So Jason, why don't you tell everybody who you are, what you do, and then I'm really excited to just get into the conversation.
Yeah, me too. And so for Tom and Shaun, thanks so much for having me on. I'm an avid podcast listener in general. This is the first time I've been a guest. So I've even hosted my own show for a period of time at a very different venue, not related to cash at all, but really excited to be a guest. And I think for the listeners, by way of introduction, again, I'm Jason Stambaugh. I'm the Director of Partner Experience at DTS Connex. From a role or function standpoint, I oversee our company's customer acquisition, onboarding, support, and success teams. And in terms of what DTS Connex is, really briefly, we have a web-based platform that contains in it a suite of online cash management tools that customers use to better manage and make their daily cash operations more efficient. In general summary, if you think everything that a retailer does around daily cash operations our system has tools and solutions that are used at scale by major retailers and even banks nationwide. And kind of unique to kind of the DTS Connex experience is that one of our core goals with all of our tools is to connect our customers to their partners, whoever they may be. So we are an agnostic service where all of our solutions are designed to connect to any bank, any courier, any system, or any device. And so that's one of the values we bring to the table is not only do we have tools that streamline and automate various processes, but they're all designed to connect to these various partners and systems and devices to overall, at the end of the day, provide the client more oversight and control and visibility into those functions. So I think hopefully that gives folks enough context about me and a bit about where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that was a great overview, and I think it's important to state, and you're seeing, and from my perspective and from Shaun's perspective as an expert kind of in the consumer trends and the cash trends area, just based on the sheer volume. Can you give like the listeners an idea of just how many retailers you interact with? Is that we talk about?
Yeah, so we have about 190 customers. They're your traditional, mainstream retail and restaurant chains, but we also work with a surprising number of other industries that manage cash, including healthcare, entertainment, wholesalers and distributors, and even services. So anyone who's really collecting cash payments, we have really a diverse user community, and our clients are of all sizes. We have, many that are in the multi-thousands that are operating with us across multiple banks and partners, et cetera. But we also have some that, have a handful of stores. And so we have a really diverse user community that we're working with today.
Yeah, so I guess that leads me into, so with that much, you probably touch a lot of locations all over the place. So what are some of the cash trends you're seeing today? And I'll kind of put a two-part question, because although we say we're not going to say it, we do every up because it's a necessity. You've been with DTS long enough to say what are some of the cash trends you're seeing today, and what are some of the newer trends based on some of the things that are occurring around COVID and around some of just the activities throughout the United States?
Yeah, so I would say overall, our position on this is that, or at least our perspective is that cash is so far from going away. In fact, we're seeing, retailers, restaurants, and again, anybody who's handling cash, they're making significant investments, both in time and money, to overhaul their cash processes and make things more efficient. So that has been continual. Both during, prior to COVID and during COVID, we really haven't seen it tapering off. And just anecdotally on the DTS Connex side, we've had some of our biggest years of growth during COVID. And I think that if I were to call out a trend, having such incredible uncertainty with business operations, with rolling closures and opens, in fact, visibility and control is far more important than it used to be. You just simply can't rely on, in the era we're living in, things just being business as usual. Abnormal has become the normal. And so I think that's one of the things that's been driving, I think, a renewed interest in investment, is that these gaps in visibilities and controls, they are really exacerbated by the market uncertainty. So I would say that, in terms of retailer, restaurant, appetite for investment and improving your daily cash operations, we're seeing that actually increase in the COVID area versus decrease. And in terms of trends or cash utilization, I'm familiar with the Fed studies, and if, again, I think by percentage of tender for payment, there's been perhaps some aggregate decline in cash usage. But we looked at this from our clients' perspective, and one of my colleagues presented at the Association of Finance Professionals conference this year in DC, and ahead of that, that session was really all about lessons learned from COVID that we need to take serious to prepare for the next crisis. And so it was a big survey of everything that major retailers and restaurants learned during that time. But one of the stats that we pulled, we took a look at DTS Connex cash deposits by volume in aggregate again for deposit activity for same store locations in 2019, mapped those same stores in 2020, and are trending it out for 2021. And what we found, as you'd imagine, those same store cash deposits did decline in particular during the shutdown. So there was a significant dip. We do have many clients that are considered essential businesses, so they were roaring during the shutdowns. But we also work with many retailers, that, clothing, shoes, that sort of thing. And, they did shut down. So we did see a big dip. But as we saw, as we hit the latter half of the year, cash certainly during holiday was way down. So we did see that 2020, but where we stand in 2021, we haven't pulled any holiday stats or anything like that to see cash usage. But what we're seeing in the trend line is that certainly those same stores from 2019, their cash deposits have returned to 2019 levels, and in many cases have exceeded it. So we'll see what happens kind of post holiday here, but we certainly have not seen, at least from the perspective of customers we work with, we're seeing cash still being used and returned to how it was being used in 2019.
Yeah, and we know there's more of it out there now, right? So I think there will be,
Yeah.
even though it's used less as a percentage, as you were saying, in aggregate terms, we just know there's more cash out there. That's the data. That's the fact.
People have a lot of dry powder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So will they spend it all at once? I don't know, but
Yeah.
but it's out there and ready to be spent. And I think that's one of the things we did talk about kind of when we gathered some folks together a couple of weeks ago, that we've said, having worked at the Fed for a long time, and also throughout these conferences, we commonly say, this increase, this big increase, is going international, or it's being stored somewhere else, and what have you. But I think it's time to question that historical logic. Surely some of it is, no doubt, but maybe more of it than we used to think is actually being held and used by U.S. consumers. I think we may have relied a little bit too heavily on the half to 2/3 is going international. Well, I mean, maybe that used to be the case, but maybe not so much anymore. Anyway, so I one of the things you were mentioning, the trends in kind of cash use, and you also mentioned, obviously the retailers are trying to be as efficient as possible with spending this, or their costs and handling all the cash. What are you having so many tentacles and reach out into the retail space, or the bank space for that matter? What are some of the trends, I guess, in that side that you're seeing in terms of how they're being efficient in handling? Obviously, visibility is the key, as you said, but are there other trends you're seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, I think perhaps too that directly relate to how the actual daily cash operations of the site. I think there are two big ones. The first is, and this is for retailers using Cash Vault today. We're seeing a lot of retailers looking at ways to further reduce the costs related to that cash cycle. And one of the kind of trending topics that we've been dealing with, working with clients and our bank partners to sort through, is deposit consolidation. So we think about, for example, a traditional retail deposit cycle. You're creating one deposit per business day. Every business day, you have a courier schedule. Let's say, for sake of argument, is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You're creating these 7 deposits, and they're being picked up, 3 times a week. And so we talk about consolidating. We're really just talking about, rather than creating 7 deposits that align to those 3 pickups, we're talking about consolidating that down to only creating a deposit, driven by your courier schedule. So the result of that, I like to say it's less is less. If I were to generally characterize why a customer wants to do this, is that the less deposits you're creating, it's the less time a store spends handling cash and doing daily preparation. It's less items for the courier to pick up and manage and track. Or even you think about that little armored logbook, less items to physically write down in that book. As it applies to the bank, it's less individual bags to track and store off, and the storage for record keeping. It's less bags to open and get the access to that cash. It's less items on the back end or recon. And because you have less items to recon, it means you have less research and exceptions, less exceptions, which means less research. And so as we look at that, kind of that less is less, there's a ton of time savings and perhaps cost savings wrapped into modifying that deposit process. So again, that is an absolute trending topic that we've been hearing clients interested in and implementing at scale in their organizations over the COVID era. So that's a big one, and I think, and this is perhaps a monster topic, so I'll just kind of state generally and let you guys take it where you want. But There's also a significant trend in devices. So I think during the times we're living in right now, courier service in general has become less predictable, just like everything's been less predictable. And there's a variety of other business dynamics that have shifted, like we think about branch banking. So a client is doing branch banking today. You dealt with branch closures. And in general, banks were generally right sizing, I guess is a kind way to say, their branch footprints with the new market dynamics and the digital consumer. We had COVID, the closures impacted, like where are we going to drop off the money if the bank isn't open anymore? We've seen branch price increases, again, really driven by consumer behavior around how you staff and manage a branch. They're just not using them the way they were. And so the revenue or the, kind of the business dynamics behind a branch have changed, which has led to some price increases. Going to a client who's using armored car has become less predictable in the time we're living in, which has led to some price increases, some service, uncertainty. So I think clients who've been relying on those depository channels, whether traditional CIT or branch banking, are kind of looking at themselves like, man, this is not as good as it used to be. And I think that's driving them to dust off, their look at purchasing safes and recyclers, even alternative devices today. And furthering that, and the, many smart safes have been around for some time. I don't know, perhaps we're in version 3.0 or 4.0, depending on who you talk to, of this technology. But in addition to some of the market dynamics changing that perhaps changed the ROIs or perceptions of value, we're also seeing net new devices. So, smaller footprint recyclers, and even alternative, devices that are in the market that aren't quite a smart safe. They're not quite a recycler, but still have that bill validating technology. And so that's another big trend we're seeing, is that for all those reasons and factors, we're seeing a lot of our clients taking a fresh look at, implementing or evaluating the use of those devices in their footprint.
Yeah, and I think you said there's a lot we could unpack there for sure on many topics, but I think we mentioned it before, but I think, for and I'm not saying there should be a silver lining to COVID. We know it's been horrible, but in terms of opening kind of policy windows or windows to actually make some efficiency improvements, I think it did propel the industry forward a bit, right? Whether it's safety in terms of whether it's having less staff, so you need to be more efficient, whether it's being more efficient because you just need to cut costs, or whether it's you don't want people to be touching, whether it's currency or cards or whatever, but you don't want there to be an exchange going on.
To that point, you hit on another major factor, the omni-channel commerce, where not only do I have to service a client over the counter, now I have to staff up or leverage a diminishing staff footprint to ship packages, to drop stuff off at curbside and service the variety of the Instacarts, the DoorDashes. All of this stuff takes time, and it's hard labor time. It's not invisible. And so I think that as you seek to figure out what the heck you do with that, and it's funny, a lot of retailers don't fully bake into their labor models often every aspect of the cash cycle to take $1 over the counter and get that same dollar to the bank. And so I think now they're starting to look at that saying, wow, that actually does take some time. And so, yeah, I think that's a great call out, Shaun, that kind of how the consumer behavior and the net new services that are now required in COVID, we're really in an omni-channel commerce world that's, changing labor models and, certainly shining some light on areas where time can be saved, whereas before they might not have really considered it or cared how long an employee is spending handling cash, but now that time is gold.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, you guys covered a lot. I have like a million things to put in there, but you guys were on a roll, so I don't want to interrupt there. So I first want to kind of talk. So you talked about trends really early on, and just again for the listener audience, because we have a lot of guests, and I actually think you're in a completely different field or place than some of our other guests. Your sample size, I mean, you have more than. You're able to see data for more than, what is it, 80,000 locations, something like that.
Yeah,
so
we have over 80,000 locations.
Yeah, yeah. So when we talk to a lot of people, and then this is not diminishing, folks, is I think your data set is, a pretty large data set to actually come to a conclusion. So I think there's value in letting listeners know that this isn't just another person that we're talking to that has an opinion. Because I know Shaun and I are very like, I'm overly cautious about this is my opinion, this is Tom's opinion versus this is based on data. So I think that's a really important when we talk about like the deposit consolidation, that you're looking at a mass number. You're not basing it on 2 or 3 people saying like, hey, we really want to consolidate. Even 2 or 3 huge retailers, you're basing it on a big piece. One thing I think I want to touch on, and I like to get into, kind of, it's kind of the overarching here, is that COVID, in my opinion, really flushed out the need for visibility and data, and the fact that we really didn't know what we were doing in the past as well as we probably should have. That's a general statement, right? Like I know you have some retailers that you've probably been working with for a really long time that had phenomenal visibility, but I got to think that COVID has really driven the fact that like this, not only do we need to consolidate to save money, but the fact that we really need to be able to see where things are. Because I know this because I was in the space. I talked to people that said, Tom, we made a decision on Friday night to close the stores like literally made a decision in real time to close stores without time to even pull money out, like not even going into their normal close down procedures. And so I got to think that data has been a big push. And I would assume that you're starting to see a trend where people are starting to use it differently. Is that I think this leads into from the question I have is, are you starting to see your data and some of the services that would be, I don't want to use traditional cash services, used in other parts of the business to help?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Tom. So historically, based on kind of our business, we've traditionally worked with treasury teams, which have a close relationship, obviously, with audit, recon, accounting, depending on how a company is structured. But during COVID, we actually saw a pronounced, increase the number of interactions we were having with customers, loss prevention or asset protection teams. And one of the main reasons for that in COVID is that they couldn't go to a store. Not, stores were shut, but I also couldn't physically visit a store on my twice annuals. So a large retailer might have 180, 200, field members who perform these routine store visits to manage compliance, certainly related to cash and cash control, but also compliance related to, fire exits and planograms and all sorts of fun things. And so we did see, and we actually hosted a webinar that's on the DTS Connex website with a client that kind of provided in that webinar a masterclass on how they've leveraged DTS Connex data around deposit behavior and safe count behavior, meaning managing that store cash inventory, as well as a newer tool that we have called Snaps that's designed to capture an image of anything from any device and store it in our platform, whether tied to a transaction or just in general. And so I think kind of, these suite of tools or the data that we have and the search tools we have really been of great interest to these asset protection teams, because now I can see something without ever visiting the store. And so I think that's piqued a lot of interest in, kind of the data that we have in general. But yeah, so Tom, to your point, I think that, we have these asset protection teams now engaged going, what can I see from afar? How can I do my job without putting my employees at risk? But we're also seeing it extended and discovering other things that, wow, this is actually kind of nice. Like, maybe I don't need to go to a store, 2-3 times a year. Maybe I could survive with one physical audit and rely on these other image-based tools. So that Snaps tool I mentioned, the inspiration for that was that armored car log that's needed. And every time there's an exception item that is believed to be missing, that log is requested from the field, and there's no great way to do that today. So that was the original intent. But now we're seeing that used for planograms, managing compliance of like where things are featured in the store, and many other types of physical logs that are kept that can't be audited otherwise. So I think that's spot on. That is something we've been seeing. In addition to that, this is perhaps not related to COVID, but it seems that in the kind of the big data environment, the machine learning, the AI, there's lots of software out there that companies use to find trends and interesting exceptions in very, very large data sets. So these teams are very interested in the data that DTS Connex has specifically around cash. We have the whole story of a deposit from the moment it's created, clear through that process to bank verification. On the change order side, we know exactly what was ordered, means for customers to log change order exceptions. And so there has been a renewed interest, I think, in providing automated data feeds to feed those EBR systems. And so we have multiple projects right now that we're working with clients on. And we kind of think that's going to be a trend that everybody is going to be asking for that data.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting. I did see the webinar, so I did see some of it, but I'm just constantly talking to people as I travel, and it's the need for visibility, the need for data, the need to do more with one tool than you needed to do before, and to step outside that linear path of cash is cash. Well, can't we do other things too? I want to touch a little bit on devices. I know you guys were talking, and you made the comment of the safe progression and like what version of the smart, safe, and recycler we're on today. This is one of these things that both from the cash news standpoint and in just Shaun and I daily conversations, I'm sure when we talk to people, it comes up a lot of what are you seeing as a trend with devices? And I know you have a different perspective because you're neutral on the devices, right? Like you're a service provider that says like, hey, we want to help you figure out your cash. You don't really favor one device over another. I'm speaking for you, so if I'm wrong, that's my perception.
It is true. That is super true. We're never going to make a device. We're never going to be an armored carrier. There's lots of things that we're never going to do. But yeah, we from our perspective on these devices, they are another way that folks are managing cash, and kind of where I started with the platform. From a platform perspective, we're deeply committed to connecting a client to their partners. And so yeah, I think kind of to your question, some of the things we're hearing in particular from clients that have an existing estate where they're using these devices or considering new ones. I think one of the important call outs to make, and again, this is all anecdotal, I don't have some survey here that says this, but an observation, and from a DTS perspective, we're very familiar with the traditional cash flow process. But when you bring a safer recycler into that environment, it breaks lots of things. Like they're great devices and equipment, but they do break a lot of in-store functions and require significant process change. They require significant adaptation on the back end to manage and measure and to recon that data. And so we're really seeing clients that are, from our perspective, that have an existing estate, looking at ways that they can streamline and automate those processes. They want to get data connected. So we're seeing a lot of that from existing estate. And I certainly think for the new format of devices, the DTS Connex team, we hosted an event that wasn't about DTS at all. It was really about our partners and the folks that we've worked with that have interesting solutions. We had a tremendous turnout of members of our user community to come check out, the latest small footprint recycler, or a device that's not quite a recycler and not, and not quite a smart safe and not quite a weight-based or friction scale. And so I think there's a ton of interest. Again, going back to what I said, I think reevaluating the ROI. I think the innovations here are giving clients some new opportunities to implement. And I think you guys have been around the smart safes perhaps a lot as well, but they're kind of big. And like, where do you put them? And, store footprints are like super planned out. And, putting that piece of hardware in, it's like, well, we could shoehorn it under this particular, it's hard to figure out. So I do think, Tom, specifically the small footprint devices, clients might really love, for example, the value of a recycler, but historically they've been enormous. And it's like where back office cash rooms are like a 4x4 room. I mean, you go in for a store visit and, you shut the door and you're like, wow, we could fit maybe 3 people in here. This feels like a very small area. It's like, where would you put a recycler? Next to the cook pot? Like, I don't know, but these smaller footprint devices are changing, I think are changing perception and perhaps giving people new opportunities, which is really, really exciting.
So I think it's important to say this because I may have met with several people, and I think Shaun actually was there one time where I said, I'm consistently hearing you need something smaller, and all of I'm not a safe manufacturer. I just working with Shaun, traveling my past, I'm like I don't know how taking my cash news out, some of our customers in the control tech side don't physically have room. They really don't. There is no real estate for retailers. Every inch of that store is money. So if you have to put something somewhere, you're taking up your real estate. So I know the folks I'm talking to are listening, and I continuously say, like, get the smaller form factor is really what, at least all of the folks I know personally and professionally, are saying like, yeah, I would love it. It would be amazing. But every inch of the store is utilized. And this is I'm speaking factually because I did this. Most new construction retail, the back room offices they want no office space. We want everything as much as you can, because every bit of the retail floor that you give up is dollars. It's plain and simple. So I'm glad you brought it up. I didn't prompt Jason, by the way, to bring that up, but it's something that I hear so regularly now that it's crazy. And then Shaun and I spent some time in the cannabis conference, and I do some stuff with them. It's the same exact thing. They already have big safes to carry everything. They need to get their cash smaller, compact than they have it. It's the same exact challenge. So I think that was something that I'm really glad you brought up, because I think for the listeners here, it benefits all of us, every one of us, to be able to make the form factor work.
I was going to just say, and it's not just the form factor, it's the other point you brought up in terms of it breaks stuff, right? You need, and that's the other thing we heard a lot over the past years, is that there wasn't a whole lot of thought to how to actually use this thing after it was sold and put in. It was like, here you go, here's a box, and and people are like, what do how does it work? How do I alter my literal movement of cash to accommodate this thing? And people just didn't put a whole lot of thought into that sort of business process innovation around it and work. And now I think they are. And I think also the other trend now, both to space and form function, and how the cash is handled, that's kind of coming to fruition, I guess, is the whole like customer facing side of things, like actually moving that recycler to do its job on the floor so it can actually take in and hopefully somewhat effectively put cash back out. And I know that's still a little ways away to get that full functionality out there, but I think that trend will help that.
Glad you brought that up, Shaun. I was going to bring up that in addition to some of the form factor, and I didn't mention smaller cassettes. So outside of recyclers just not being the size of a freezer, making them in a smaller footprint. It's like, even the traditional smart safe, much smaller cassettes are available now in a very tiny package. It's like the size of like a computer tower. But in terms of those self-service kiosks, this has been a new thing that just in the last 6 months that we've been exposed to amongst our existing user community are, hey, we're buying these kiosks, for whether they're a recycler or not, and they may or may not be connected, and most likely they're not, to the back office smart safe or recycler unit. So now we have an entirely new ecosystem where we have fleets of devices, and I'm not an expert in the industry, so I know perhaps many of the mainstream safe and recycler providers may have a range of self-service kiosks, but they don't seem to be interconnected. A lot of the kiosks that I've been hearing about aren't the names that you typically hear that are selling managed services around safes and recyclers. So there's a whole new ecosystem of what do you do if you have 7 self-service units out front and you got the big machine in the back? Like, how do you know that when the employee emptied the cassette in the front recycler that $1,000 they removed from the contents actually made its way to the safe? And right now, I don't know. So these are all net new fun problems that I'm sure on the DTS side we're going to be sorting through with clients in the years to come. But absolutely, that is a perfect call out. That is a major shift in the omni-channel COVID era, where now we're getting these things out on the floor, reducing employee interaction with customer. That's a net new problem that the industry is going to have to sort through.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and I actually did write a note because you guys, again, when you guys are talking and you're bringing up so many different things. One is, I know my whole entire career has been based on technology, but we and definitely in the retail space, and I don't think as much in the banking, but I'm starting to see the trend in retail. And I was a director of technology for a large retailer, so I can say this with that. It's always, well, what technology can we throw at it to fix this problem? And the challenge is, the learning curve, the implementation is not easy. Forced innovation is bad. I wrote an article about this. I've spoken about this. Forced innovation, trying to keep up with someone else, is bad, and it creates all sorts of challenges that are unknown. And I think, smart safes are not new, but it isn't as simple as just plugging it in and going like, cool, we're ready. We've got this done. There's so much that goes with it. And then and this is not a self-fulfilling prophecy from a control tech standpoint. We see in Europe, we see it now, is we have to get away from cassettes. Cassettes are a pain in the ass. Sorry. I mean, they really are. You can do a self-sealing bag. It allows you to be tamper evident. It allows you to move very quickly. France is fully done. There are 2 major players in the US that are pushing it. And yes, I do manufacture bags for a living, but the reality is that there's just things you can do with the bags, RFID enabled, that with cassettes are a problem, and they don't break as much. Cassettes are a nuisance. Everybody that I know who's rolled it goes like, God, these cassettes, it's miserable, they break, and that's just the life. It's not that they're poorly made. So I thought that was one to touch. But I would say the kiosk units that I'm seeing are bolt-ons, and it's again that forced innovation. We got to do this because this company did it. We don't want to be left behind. We can't hire people. And my favorite example, and it's a real one, is I can't remember when it was, many years ago when McDonald's did the kiosk, and they did that. My office was on 55th and 3rd, and one of the first lab stores was 2 blocks away, and it was a disaster. It was a disaster for the consumer. It was a disaster for this, and I got to watch it every day. Like, I'm not a big McDonald's guy, but I got to, because of the technology, I got to watch the transition. And what ended up happening is McDonald's very intelligently layered, well, we're going to have kiosks, but we also have people. And everybody who did it is like, oh, they're going to get rid of people. I'm like, you know how hard it is to make this actually work, from a consumer standpoint, everything. So I continuously hear the kiosk angle, and this is what I do for a living. I talk about risk for retailers. If you're not assessing what goes on when you put the kiosk in, it isn't even a Band-Aid. It's a big transition to have a self-service payment kiosk put in. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that comes out of it. And everybody I know who's done it, both from the industry that I'm just friends with or working with directly, go, wow, there were a lot of things that came. And to your point is, you're almost never buying it from the same person. So, oh, well, there's APIs, it's easy. And I know you're in software. Yeah, someone still has to do the work. Someone still has to maintain it. Someone has to make sure it's safe. Someone has to patch it. Someone has to figure it out. Someone has to fix the hardware. Someone has to train the people. So there's all those things. So Shaun and I often talk about this on the show of digital payments. We talk about, oh, it's better, it's easier, it's cheaper. Is it? Is it? Right?
I think the other thing on the kiosk that kind of bridges that is, I heard a story while we were in Chicago about, a fast food retailer whose offices are right down the street, who you already mentioned, Tom, who, put in a bunch of kiosks. None of them, I think, as we know right now, don't take cash, right? So you have to still take an extra step to spend cash. You got to go to the cashier. And what some of the research was showing was that was actually costing them sales, right? It was people were walking out. They would place the order and then wait, I have to wait in this line to actually, it's taking too long. I'm out. And they would leave before they paid. And the story as it was relayed anyway, was that, some of the treasury folks and the management came back and said, these things are actually costing us sales. So fix it or get rid of them. But they're not working as intended. So, there are a lot of things. It's not as easy as just moving to a digital payment, right? Because there's plenty of people that want to spend cash and get annoyed when there's a whole extra step involved to spend it.
Yeah. And I would say that, so that was a personal, and I think I want to say this because I'm not shy. I actually applaud McDonald's for trying it and figuring it out, because in retail, it's very hard to be the first, and you get a lot of backlash, right? Labor, technology. So I applaud them. And I think now, and I can say this, I remember going to Frankfurt and they had the kiosk or the person, and it made it was the perfect unified commerce situation in fast food, where they're catering to the customer the way the customer wants to be done. And that, I think, Jason, you hit on it probably more than a dozen times, and we're not going to have time to talk about it today, is that this e-commerce, this unified commerce piece of retailers really have to address that. And again, I lived this for 22 years, so I have a different perspective. I actually, my first retail job, we didn't have email. There was no website. I actually watched that progression and grew in that progression from a junior person to a senior level person, a retailer. And I will tell you that on the outside, it looks easy, but there is a daunting amount of things. And everybody forgets that, I didn't work, my rounding out, I only had 18,000 employees to worry about training. Let me just tell you something, 18,000 employees trying to figure out how to train them to do something. It's a monumental task. And then you have a million customers that you have to train. Like it is an enormous task. And then if you're in the cash world, your armor carrier needs to be trained, your banks need to be trained, everybody needs to be trained. So there's a whole host of things that come up there. I knew that we would not cover everything we wanted to talk about, Jason. So we started that as that. So I would love to have you back even within a month or so, because I know we want to talk about the coin shortage. I know we want to talk about other things. And again, your perspective is actually very different than what we've had, because most of the folks that we've had on are really in the banking world talking about trends from that side, where you're touching, almost 100,000 locations that are actually doing it. So your perspective is just so valuable for our listener base. So I thank you for coming on. I know we went a little over, so I appreciate that, because I'm sure you have something to do. So thank you so much for coming on. I think we'll ask probably in the next month or so if you can come on just to finish up, because I know I want to talk about data. I want to talk about cash short, the coin shortage and some of the things you're hearing with that. And I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for joining us. Shaun, any final words?
No, I just thank Jason as well. I mean, it was a great discussion. I know we'll be playing this in January, I think at some point. So I would remind any listeners that we are still hosting our banknote and currency conference in DC late in February. So, be on the lookout for that. I'm going to talk to Jason after this. Maybe I can get him on a panel there. He's got a lot of insights, but nonetheless, thank you for taking the time. And as Tom said, we definitely want to have you back to talk about more stuff. So,
well, thanks, guys. I started out, this first time I've been a guest. I'm glad that I was a good enough guest to want back for another show. And it's been a pleasure and happy to join you guys.
Thank you again. And so for all the listeners, just in case, we're going to say it, even though you'll be listening to it later, everybody have a really healthy, happy new year. It's been 650 days with COVID. So I think next year we're going to stop almost 90 weeks, right? It might be 91 weeks now. I can't do math anymore, but so I just, everybody spend the time with your family. And again, Jason, thank you so much. Please give Lou and Josh my best. So, I'm super excited. It's always good when it's someone that I actually know I'm on as a guest. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. But with that, we're going to sign off. Please, please, please subscribe to the podcast. Again, Shaun and I were together and we were actually with people that are like, oh yeah, I listen to it all the time, but I don't know how to subscribe to it. It really does help us. We love that people are listening, but hit the subscribe button. If you can give us a review, it helps. We're available on every single platform. So if you listen to the podcast anywhere, you can hear us. We're on YouTube. You can actually see us. And then thank you to our producer, as always, Samantha. And we'll see you soon. Everybody stay safe.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.